we were talking about the name of Yahweh the other day. We'll wait a moment here to get into it. But... Hey Greg, we're just starting.
Yeah, made it.
So the other day we were talking about a significance about the name spelled Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So in Exodus 3, he says this is his Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is his Shem, and then he uses this word Zakar. Zion, Kaf, Resh. So I was at somebody's place up there in Canada, and there's this Israeli lady running a business, and one of the people was talking to her about Yahweh and mentioned the word He, H-E, in reference to him, and she said, how do you know it's a man's name? How do you know it's masculine? How do you know it's a male gender? What makes you think that this God figure, this deity, has any reference of gender? How would you answer that? Is that just a cultural cliche, idiom? What makes you think, let me put it in simple terms, what makes you think that God is masculine?
Without knowing the Hebrew, that I presume you're going to go into, and he created man in his image.
But that was mankind, which included both male and female.
Well, according to King James, he's the father, not the mother.
Yes,
However,
but El Shaddai talks about the many-breasted one.
Sheen
The
Dalet Yod
nourisher.
is Shaddai.
That's Diana.
There was a,
What?
hang on, there was a lady here whose name was Shadlin. This word Shad is a breast. So Shaddai is feminine, and grammatically speaking, the letter He at the end of a word is the feminine suffix. The Vav is the masculine suffix. So if both these two are referential of the feminine, what makes us think that this is a masculine entity? In spite of King James calling him the father, but then you have to go back and say, well, what did he really say? And so for this lady to say, why do you call him he? Where's the real answer? Anybody else got any ideas?
Trying to think what he means in Hebrew.
Who was Yeshua? Is he a he or a she?
He came in the form of man. So man was made by duality,
It's
male
plural.
and female. So, huh?
It's plural.
Plural. Elohim is plural. So if you say the word Elohim, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yod, Mem, just for what it's worth, the dictionary says that you can stick a Vav in here, which has the O sound, but other than that, there is no O sound, so it's El-Him. This is where we get A-L-H-I-M, but it's pronounced Elohim. So if you have a dot up here in modern, that's the O sound. If you have a dot here, it's the U sound, and if there's a couple dots down here, it's typically the V sound, but that gets into vowel points. But just to say, is it Elohim or Elohim? It could go either way. That's getting into other grammatical stuff that I wasn't going to bring up. But this suffix, Yod Mem, is plural. There's two plurals. There's Yod Mem and there's Vav Tav. And this one is basically the masculine suffix and that one the feminine, which almost doesn't make any sense because the Mem is a picture of a womb, which you'd think ought to be feminine. So stuff bounces all around. It's really hard to figure out a system. And the reason I'm saying that is because I tried to figure out, is there a system by which you can easily see, and there doesn't seem to be. So it's very noticeable. Somebody else had their hand up. Was that you? Or?
Well, going back to what I mentioned earlier as far as the word man representing both men and women, I would want to roll back to the original word that was used in that verse, and then look at the Hebrew, and were those distinct words when he identified man and woman, because the English language concept that man is both man and woman is not necessarily the same concept in Hebrew.
Possibly. Any one of these subjects you can zero in on. For example, if I remember back when I was a kid, we had baseball cards, right, that you get in bubblegum packages. And every once in a while, you'd get a card with the whole team. You know, the picture of all these guys on the team. But then the rest of the deck of these cards, this card would be just that guy, and another deck would be just this guy, you know, their face. So you zero in on this aspect and that aspect, and you know, so if man, Adam, was made with X and Y as his, name escapes me, the DNA chromosomes, gender determinators, chromosomes, he has them both, X and Y. So how did Yahweh make woman? Well, some people say, well, he took the woman out of the man, and woman actually has a double X. But wait a minute, look, man still has the X in him. So it's almost like what he did, he just zeroed in on isolating the X, and then said, okay, she's just going to be just X. So technically, the idea that woman, the feminine side of man, was removed from the masculine isn't really true. The masculine still has both, if you say the Y chromosome is male and the X chromosome is female, the masculine guy, man, still has both. But the feminine is simply the one, like zeroing in on a specialty product with only the X. It's just kind of an interesting consideration. Well, here's the trick answer. Because this word zakar is translated to be remember, or to memorialize, or to commemorate. And this all means to recall to your mind. So when he says that this is the name that he will recall to mind generation after generation throughout all the ages. So this name has a certain function which is different than the name that he said Ehyeh, Aleph He Yod He. Then he said the word Asher, Ehyeh. So when he first answered the question to Moses, Moses said, "Who shall I say sent me?" Because they're going to say, "Who were you talking to that gave you this stuff?" And he said, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. It's translated, I am that I am. Or the Jewish publication says, I will be that, or who, or what I will be. It's like, well, wait a second. Is this present tense, or is this future tense? Why is it that the translators disagree? Which is it? In English, if I say I am, that means I'm current. I will, I'm not current, but I shall in the future. It's a reference of time. So the English mind chooses the I am because of the connotations of the infinite now, without reference of past or future. But yet he also says in another place, the one who was and is to come. So he sets up this concept of distance, both directions. And so what I'm saying is the way you translate words changes everything. And it may not be a matter of which is right and which is wrong, but the question is, how much can you see that's in these words? And then he said to Moshe, so he answers, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, and then he zeroes in on just this word and says, tell them Ehyeh sent you. So that's where we get the idea, well, if this is I am that I am, tell them I am sent you. So it's like, okay, tell them I am sent you. But then he says right on the heels of that, that this name Yahuwah, which see, that's different spelling. Yahuwah is his memorial name, his name of remembrance. But then in the dictionary, and this is the benefit of the dictionary, if we have Memorial Day, what are we doing? We're recalling to mind, and we're commemorating, we're celebrating, we're having something, say, hey, remember when we went on that vacation? Do you remember when there was this war? You remember when there was that famous speech that one of our leaders gave? It's all about having something stuck in your mind so that it doesn't remove. So another meaning of this word zakar is to pierce the mind. Not only recall the mind, but to pierce the mind and get lodged almost like this barb coming off of a plant or a fishhook. The purpose of this is to stick into your brain and not let go. You can't just throw it away. And he said this name is going to serve that function. So if something gets stuck, it's connected, it's hooked. Well, that's the concept of the letter Vav. Letter Vav literally means a nail or a hook, which is an attachment device. Sometimes it's drawn like that. It's the modern letter shaped like that, which kind of looks like a, if you have a nail, that you pound down in just a tent stake. When they set up the Mishkan and they had tent stakes, those were just called Vavs. The guy's name, Levi, is Lamed Vav Yod, and his mother said, now, because of this son being born, my husband will be attached to me. This Lamed means for or unto. It's kind of a reference prefix. And this is the letter as a suffix meaning me or my. And here's the letter Vav. So you say hook. So she named him Levi because he is serving for my attachment to my husband. So you can just break down every word letter by letter and understand the way the whole language works. So this word Yahweh somehow is going to be this Shem Zakar to Vav, or to, for the sake of Levi, Levi, that's where we get the word Louis, like St. Louis, Louis, or then it became Lewis. It's all the same word, but it means to be attached to me. So when the president has his secret service that goes with him wherever he goes as his shadow, he's just right there with him to protect him, that secret service is his Levi. They go wherever he goes. So there's these concepts. So when Yahweh chose the Levites to be the ones that were attached to the tabernacle service, it's also this same thing. Their identity was in association or connected to the tabernacle and the priesthood. The other tribes are whatever. We were talking about the role of the different tribes and what it would look like to have a cultural identity if each one of the tribes had something. Well, we know that Levi was attached to the tabernacle, the priestly service, and we know that there was something about the scepter given to Yehuda, and Yehuda was a big strong guy, and because the first three brothers blew it, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, Jacob gave the firstborn authority to Judah, but he wasn't firstborn, he was fourthborn. But then Joseph was the firstborn of the favored wife, so he actually had the birthright position, even though he wasn't the firstborn out of the whole family clan. And so you got all these things mixed up, and for us to say, well, wait a minute, what's supposed to be going on here? traditionally, culturally, certain things have filtered or percolated down through the ages to us, and we're just kind of grasping at straws, kind of dried out, hollowed out something. But the restoration of the 12 tribes of Israel, for him to bring back, resurrect the confederacy of the 12 tribes, that we haven't seen anything like this. We're going into new territory. This is like the frontier. They say that, you know, space is the last frontier, or they thought that going to the northwest was a frontier, Alaska was a frontier, maybe to the Arctic or the Antarctic. But if you read the scripture, the re-emergence of the nationhood of Israel as the 12 tribes is this whole frontier that we have never even seen. When David brought all the 12 tribes together, with him being the monarch, he was contending against Saul for quite a while, and then he was fighting against his enemies for quite a while, and then he handed it to Solomon. So there was this, you might say the golden age was right there, the last half of David's reign, the first half of Solomon's reign before he went nuts. And so we look back and think, oh, that's the glory days of Israel. And everything that we look back at saying, what would it be like if we were all doing the right thing and had Yah's favor and everything was working like he dreamed it would? We look back at this one little moment of a blip of maybe 40 or 50 years and said, well, that's the ideal, but could we possibly measure up? Especially if what's in front of us is the tribulation and there's no hope. But there's verses, which I don't have accessible to tell you what they are at the moment, off the top of my head, but there's verses where Yahweh said, I will make you guys restored better than in the days of your forefathers. So what Yahweh has in mind for us is more glorious than the days of Moshe or Joshua or even Joseph in Egypt or even David and Solomon. That's what I read. What does that look like? That looks like each of the 12 tribes, like the luster of each stone that was on the breastplate of the high priest. There was no stone greater than the next. They each were a particular type of stone with a particular type of beauty and luster, and they each fit together. If one was missing, they almost slaughtered Benjamin because they were acting stupid, and all the rest of the nation were slaughtering the Benjamites, and all of a sudden they stopped and go, wait a minute, what are we doing? We're annihilating one of the tribes? We can't do that. Even though they deserve it, you can't just rip out one of the stones and throw it away. Neither can you rip out 11 of the stones and say, we're all Jews. That's not the picture of Israel. Israel is the 12 tribes, each one living up to their maximum potential, given the skill set, given the role that Yahuwah had designed and intended for each one. I liken it to a military where you have the Navy, those who deal with the water. You have the Army, those who deal with the land. And then you have the Air Force, those who deal with the air. And then in our modern military, we have those who deal with the outer space region, quadrants of beyond the air, and those who are underground or under the sea. That's a whole nother realm of jurisdiction that we have to have military forces guiding or covering those bases for each of us. And then you've got the domestic concerns as well as the international concerns. And then you've got the Coast Guard, which has a whole nother fight. What I'm saying is that things are broken down into the categories where each group does the best it can covering that angle, and they're dependent on the other guys covering their back. If you're on a